So good morning or good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Sarah Melvin, and I'm the International Student Services Coordinator. Thank you for joining us today at our International Travel and Quarantine Procedures webinar. We've hosted a few of these webinars previously. However, in light of the recent flight bans and continuous changes with restrictions, we wanted to provide another session to review what's currently going on with the pandemic and travel restrictions. We care very much about our students, and it's very important to us to ensure you have the most up-to-date information so you can make informed decisions about traveling during the pandemic or pausing your travel until a later date, depending on everyone's individual situation. So I'd like to take a moment to just give a brief overview of what we're going to be covering today. I'll start with introducing our lovely panelists, followed by a review of the current travel restrictions, details on the recent travel ban. We'll review our Lakehead University quarantine commitment plan and what that entails, and then we'll finish off with an open Q&A session. Please feel free to pose your questions throughout the session, and we ask that everyone use the Q&A function, which I see some of our students are doing already. So this function is located on the bottom bar of your Zoom screen. You may also want to select speaker view. This is an option at the top right of your screen, so you can always see the panelist like myself that is currently speaking. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our Lakehead crew that we have with us today. My lovely co-host for today's session is Katie Fraser, and Katie is our International Engagement Specialist at our Aurelia campus. Also joining us today are Vijay Babu, Latifa Olatunde, and Laura Puttis, our International Student Advisors. Jennifer Hay is our Immigration Advisor. We have Chris Gallinger here, who is our International Accounts Officer. So if you have any questions related to your student account or health insurance, please post them in the Q&A and Chris can address them. We're excited to have our residence team joining us today, and that includes Shannon Foster, who is our Director of Resident Services, Ashley Fretz, the Residence and Operations Assistant, and Michelle Denton and Jessica Young, our Residence Area Coordinators. And last but certainly not least, Sabrina McKelleron, who is our Director of International Student Services here at Lakehead. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over to Sabrina, who'd like to say a few opening remarks.
Hi, I'd like to welcome all of our amazing students from around the world to join us today. Thank you for coming. We have a lot of information to provide. It's really important. We know that during this difficult time, you're making very uncertain decisions. You're in very precarious situations. And we want to make sure that the information you have, that you're acting on and making your decisions, help you make informed decisions about your safety and about your future when coming to Canada. I hope through the volume of staff from different departments that are in this session, you realize how important and how much you matter to all of us at Lakehead. And we're really excited to welcome you to our campus, and we're sad that it's been delayed. I'd like to introduce our Manager of Residence Services, Shannon Foster, to say a few words.
Hello, everyone. On behalf of Resident Services, I just want to say that we're excited to be able to talk to you today, and I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. But we do look forward to seeing you here on our campuses, whether you quarantine in residence or not, and just let you know that we're here for you and whatever you need during this difficult time. So welcome, everybody.
Thanks, Sabrina. Thanks, Shannon. So we thought we'd get started by reviewing some of the travel restrictions that have been put in place. So on the screen, we've summarized some of the travel restrictions that we feel are most important for international students to be aware of. So we'll quickly review each of those. First, as of January 7th, you know that all travelers who are seeking entry to Canada are required to provide a negative COVID test completed 72 hours prior to your flight departing to Canada. In some countries, it can be required up to 96 hours for certain destinations. So please familiarize yourself with the restrictions for your specific location and the requirements for your travel. Next, as of January 31st, all flights to and from Mexico and Caribbean countries were banned up until April 30th, 2021. So we'll be watching to see if there are further updates to extend this particular restriction. As of February 22nd, all air travelers arriving in Canada with certain restrictions are required to reserve a room through the Government of Canada's approved hotel list for 3 nights at your own costs upon arrival to your port of entry. So we have posted lots of information on our website, including a link to book, to make your online booking for your hotel, and also provided a phone number that you can call. So we definitely encourage you again to visit our website for those instructions and make those arrangements prior to making any travel plans and departing your country. Last but not least, last Thursday, the Canadian Ministry of Transport made an announcement that they are suspending all incoming flights to Canada from Pakistan and India as of April 22nd at 11:30 at night for 30 days, while they're monitoring the various progression of different variants of concern in Canada. So the Canadian Ministry of Transport will review the flight suspension in 30 days, and this ban will either be lifted or extended. So please be aware that if you're planning any kind of travel to Canada, indirectly, many countries are changing requirements and restrictions. So we encourage you to also be aware of those for your individual circumstance and do your research in advance. So we do not recommend travel until it's safer and more stable to do so. So this is the main concern that we wanted to address today. We know that it's been causing a lot of stress to a lot of our students. And like Sarah and Sabrina and Shannon have mentioned, we want to make sure that you have the information and resources to make the best informed decisions and reduce as much stress as possible. At the bottom of the screen, we've included the Government of Canada website where you can review various travel restrictions by country. So this is a great website to get you started. We also list various websites on the Lakehead University Quarantine Commitment Plan webpage to assist you. So we definitely encourage you to check those out. So for those of you who were affected by the most recent travel restriction, if you have already submitted stage 1 or 2 and your flight has been canceled due to this travel restriction, we wanted to give you a very detailed explanation of what your next steps are going to be. So as per our email on April 22nd, you would have received this from Sarah Melvin, who spoke with you earlier. You were informed that unfortunately we had to cancel your quarantine plan. We encourage you to contact your airline that you had booked through, as well as the hotel where you had booked your mandatory government quarantine with regards to your cancellations. We strongly encourage you not to rebook your flights until the ban has been lifted, given that it could be extended. Right now, we can't predict what will happen, but we encourage you to wait to find out more through announcements from the Canadian government. Unfortunately, because we have canceled your quarantine commitment plan through Lakehead University, you will need to start from the beginning of your LU quarantine process and resubmit your stage 1. So this includes reaching out to residents to reaffirm your booking, depending on your new travel dates. So again, starting from the beginning, checking on your accommodations plan, whether that's in residence or off campus, and including this information as part of your stage 1. So we will put the link to our website where the instructions are included for the stage 1 quarantine plan booking to remind you of where to visit. But please take time in filling out that stage 1 of your plan. There's lots of information required. And the more information you provide us, the more quickly we can facilitate the review and approval of your plan. Our quarantine team continues to grow. We have lots of members. Many are on our call today, but some were not able to make it. But please be assured that we are working as quickly as possible to respond to your inquiries. And when it's safe to do so and we start to receive your new submissions, we will review and approve them as quickly as possible. But we want to remind you that as per our website, for stage 1 approvals, please give us up to 96 hours or 4 business days to respond to you. This allows us to make sure that we are thoroughly reviewing your application and getting back to you with some follow-up questions to clarify your specific plans. For stage 2, so once you receive approval for stage 1 and you are encouraged to complete stage 2, we require 48 hours to respond, or 2 business days. So please make note that this doesn't include weekends or statutory holidays in Canada. We do our best to remind you of this when we're communicating with you via email, but please know that there are many of us working behind the scenes very quickly to get back to you as soon as possible. And lastly, a reminder to please not book your flights until you have been reapproved for stage 1. Again, we remind you of this on the website, and we try our best to remind you over email. But it's really important that you do this because there could be a few follow-up conversations with regards to your stage 1 approval. So knowing that you need to resubmit your quarantine plan, we thought we would take the opportunity today to quickly review the main steps that are involved with preparing to travel to Canada as a refresher. So first, we encourage you to visit the Lakehead University Quarantine Commitment Plan website. Again, we'll put the link in the chat box there. But please review this webpage in its entirety. You can't have too much information, and the more familiar you are with it, the less stressed you're going to be, and the more confident you will be in submitting your quarantine plan. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is thinking about developing your plan. So think about all of the different details involved that we ask you to speak to in your stage 1 approval. So for example, we've talked about your accommodations. If that's on campus, making sure you firm up your booking and that it's available and ready for you. If it's off campus, there are requirements. If you are quarantining in the community, you can also find those on our website. And if you have any concerns, just email us and we can clarify what those requirements are if you are completing your quarantine off campus. Also, while developing your plan, you need to think about your food and your meals, how you're going to obtain those. If you're planning to purchase pre-made meals or groceries online, we'll require you to show proof that or to tell us that you have a credit card that can be used in Canada so that you're able to do some online purchasing and obtain that food. You need to make sure that you're on budget, that you know what your financial comfort level is to support yourself while in quarantine. We encourage you to purchase a universal adapter to travel with to make your travel more smooth. And lastly, we always ask to make sure that you provide us with a phone number that we can reach you at when you are in Canada. And at the very least, this needs to be through WhatsApp. So even if you don't have a SIM card yet and we can contact you on WhatsApp, that's okay. We understand that you might not be able to do this until after you complete quarantine. But those are some of the things that we encourage you to think about, some of the common questions and areas of clarification that we go over with students. So hopefully that's helpful. Once you have a great plan, step number 3 is actually submitting your stage 1 approval through the Lakehead website. Step number 4 is the waiting game, but please watch for your emails. Our team will likely have some follow-up questions for you, just to make sure that you are going to be safe and secure and healthy during your quarantine. Step number 5, one of our quarantine team members will email you with your approval for stage 1. And in that email, we'll include instructions to move on to stage 2 and how to go about that. We will also remind you in that email that it's now time to go ahead and book your flights. Bringing us to step number 6, booking your flight and your COVID test prior to leaving your home country, which could be 72 to 96 hours before departure. So it's best to check with your airline to also confirm what these requirements are. Once you've done this, you can move on to the next step of submitting your stage 2 request. We will require your flight itineraries. If you were traveling on from Toronto to Thunder Bay, we do require that your Thunder Bay flight is included with your stage 2 submission. We have many students who forget to do that, but we do need to make sure it's there. And part of that is because we provide you with a taxi voucher that takes you from the Thunder Bay airport to your place of quarantine. And we can't do that if we don't have that flight. We're reminding you to then go ahead and book your mandatory government hotel stay at your port of entry. So this will likely be in Toronto. And And once you're cleared through all these steps, we will then approve you through stage 2. And this is where we send your approval letter. So it's on Lakehead letterhead. It verifies your name, your program, your student ID number, how long your program length, and confirms that you have fulfilled the requirements of Lakehead University's quarantine commitment plan. This is a really important letter, and we need to make sure that you have it printed to travel along with you. We will also send you a taxi voucher, as I previously mentioned, which you should also print. The email that these documents come in also includes lots of great information that reminds you about other documents you can print to help your travel go more smoothly. And so it's a good idea to print everything in there and always have that for reference. So we hope this is helpful to you. Again, reviewing that information more than once is definitely recommended, and printing everything possible that we've sent you. Step number 10, download your ArriveCan app and upload all the requested information on there. And then last but not least, once you arrive, please make sure you're communicating with us. We want to make sure that you've arrived safely, that you have your questions answered, that you're not feeling any stress at any point throughout the process. And that's where we can really assist you. But we need to know when you've actually arrived in Canada so that we can further direct you. So that is a brief, well, not a really brief, but a good summary of what's involved with the quarantine commitment plan. So hopefully that's helpful to you. We have been doing drop-in sessions on a weekly basis, and we also field lots of inquiries through email. So we wanted to address some of the most frequently asked questions and give you some quick answers to these. So first one is, where can I find more information about LU's quarantine commitment plan? By now, you should definitely know that that's definitely available on our website. That is the #1 place we're directing you to. We do our best to update it with new travel advisories and information from the government at the top of the page. So although we always say go to our Government of Canada websites for the most recent information, we do try and direct you there and provide as much assistance as possible. But please visit that website and review it thoroughly. Next one is, what proof of registration am I required to show? You must show proof of registration for the upcoming term. So this is one of the requirements at the port of entry, because it shows that you have essential reasons for traveling and entering Canada. So we do check this as part of your stage 1 quarantine approval. Number 3, can I quarantine in an off-campus rental? Yes, that is definitely possible. The 14-day quarantine plan can be done either off campus or in Lakehead with Lakehead residents. We highly recommend that you consider completing your quarantine with Lakehead residents, because we can provide the 24/7 support. There's security on campus, and you get lots of extra add-ons with that in comparison to quarantining in the community. It can be a little difficult to find the appropriate place off campus to complete your quarantine. So we highly recommend you consider staying in one of our residence spaces. Should you book your flights before applying for an LU quarantine plan? No, we recommend that you do not book your flights until you're approved for stage 1, which I previously mentioned. Another common question we often get is, can I complete quarantine in the GTA or elsewhere in Ontario? Please be aware that quarantine must be completed in the same city as your campus. So this is the city of Thunder Bay or the city of Orillia. This is a necessity because we need to be able to effectively supervise and support you during your quarantine. So this is for your own health and safety. So we cannot allow you to quarantine out of our 2 campus cities. Number 6, what documents should I bring with me as I travel? So as I mentioned in our approval email, we give you very detailed information about what to print and carry with you. So please make sure you read that. If you have additional questions or concerns, given your own personal circumstances, please reach out to us. And again, we'll put our email in the chat box too, so you know how to find us. And then what information is required on for my stage 1 approval. We previously talked about this, but some big questions that we have for you are around your accommodations, access to food and necessities, a phone number that we can reach you at, and how you can support yourself financially. So these are some of the questions that if we don't receive enough information in your stage 1 plan, we will ask you for additional clarification over email after you submit your stage 1. So those are some of the frequently asked questions. And so what we're going to do now is open it up to a Q&A session. And this is where we want to hear from you. So we have lots of experts on our panel today, from our residence team to our international student services team, accounts, lots of different people here. So if you have questions, now is the opportunity to get those answered. So you are welcome to use the Q&A box. I see we have some going there. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to get started with our open Q&A.
Thanks, Katie. Okay, everyone, I know we've had a lot of questions coming in, so I'm just going to go through them here, and we'll try to answer as many as we can in the time we have remaining. One that I'm seeing that came in originally was the student is asking, they have a family member that is living in the Toronto area. So after the hotel quarantine, can I quarantine at their place in the GTA? The answer is no. As Katie outlined, you have to quarantine in the same city as your campus. So for Thunder Bay students, Thunder Bay campus students, that would be Thunder Bay. For Orillia campus students, that would be Orillia. You have to be in our local public health region in order for us to meet our COVID-19 readiness plan requirements. And so you must quarantine either in Thunder Bay or Orillia. I see Jen put a comment in the chat box to speak to the CRS points. Jen, did you want to do that now? And I'll keep reviewing the questions.
Yeah, sounds good. So hello, everybody. My name is Jennifer Hay, and I do the immigration advising. Thank you, Sarah, for this wonderful webinar, and great to see all of our team online. I know there's lots of questions around immigration, lots of confusion for students. So I'll just give you a little background about all of the rules and exceptions in place as of during this COVID pandemic time. So as of last year, IRCC did announce that students can complete up to 100% of their courses online from outside of Canada and will still qualify for their postgraduate work permit. This is great news for students. It puts way less stress on you having to be here in Canada. However, once your visa is approved, and travel is okay, you will be able to enter Canada anytime during your studies and before your visa is expired. The visa is the stamping in your passport, so that allows you to enter. When you actually enter the country is when they will physically print your study permit and your work permit. And this gives you the ability to apply for what's called a social insurance number, a SIN number, as well as access health insurance. So both your health insurance and your social insurance number are not started until you actually enter Canada. All the time that you study while your visa is being processed, as we know there are delays across the globe, all of this time will be counted towards your postgraduate work permit and towards your degree completion at Lakehead. Please make note of our important dates. It is important to know the refund schedule as well as the last day to withdraw from classes when making important decisions about studying. If for some reason your visa is refused, please reach out to our team right away, myself, to talk to you about what options you have and what does that mean for you in your studies at Lakehead. Thankfully, we know the processing has been very slow and biometric requests are slowly going through. So we're seeing a lot of our students who started back in September arriving over the winter term. So please be patient with IRCC, but please note that we are here to support and advocate for anything that we can help possible. I know a lot of students are interested in staying in Canada after they graduate, and there's a program called Express Entry. Express Entry is a point system, and there's a comprehensive ranking system, a CRS, that would give you a score based on your age, education, work experience, and language. We know that studying in Canada gives you additional points, that Canadian education. And as of right now, although the postgrad work permit has some exemptions, the express entry rule for those points still stays the same. Please note that people like myself that are part of colleges and universities are constantly meeting with IRCC to advocate for these and understand, trying to teach immigration advisor officers what this means to students and the impact to them. So we're constantly working with them to make these changes. And we've seen lots of exceptions and exemptions in favor of students so far. So I'm hopeful that we'll continue to see so. But I just wanted to clarify that for the postgraduate work permit and the CRS points. I can definitely drop my email in the chat if anyone has any questions. We do weekly drop-in immigration on Tuesdays and Thursday afternoons. So feel free to come if you have any further questions regarding that stuff. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Jen. Appreciate it. I'll just get through a couple quick questions and I'll pass it off to Chris after that. A question came in, is there any rule that I need to complete my 14-day quarantine before the first date of my classes? What are your suggestions? So of course, in a perfect world, we want you to complete, plan your travel, complete your quarantine prior to classes, and then start your classes. However, with travel bans and everything going on, that might not be possible. And so it's going to be up to you to decide whether you want to travel mid-semester, let's say. Obviously, we know spring summer classes start, I believe May 1st to 3rd, somewhere around there. And so if you're traveling at the end of May, this is going to now go into probably the last part of your semester. And so that's something that you need to consider if you want to actually travel at that time, or whether you want to sort of hit the pause button and wait to travel and in, let's say, July or August and plan for the fall term. So unfortunately, that's something that you do need to consider. But the one thing that is important is when you're planning your travel date, you have to be able to have essential reasons to enter Canada, which means you have to actively be studying. So that's, we say the upcoming term, that's what they want to see. They don't want students coming in for, a summer break, for lack of a better term. That's not an essential reason for entering Canada. And so if you're unsure of your particular situation, because there's so many different scenarios, I encourage you to email us. If my coworkers could put the quarantine email in the chat box for me, please email us there and we can work with you on a case-by-case basis. Another one, I have my flight on June 13th. So I'm assuming what I'm getting a lot is students that are, that had a flight due to the flight ban. The airlines are rescheduling them already for, let's say, mid-June, for example, this one. What should I do now? And also, when should I start the process of approval? So if you've had your flight, I'll put this out to our quarantine team as well. I'll say my suggestion first, and maybe everyone else can give some suggestions. What I would say is if you've had now a new flight confirmed because your airline has just gone ahead and done it, I would submit your stage 1 again, or if you haven't already, start the process. And what we can do is begin to review and get you to a point where you would be approved, and then we can see where the travel ban is at and provide you the documents if we're in a good place. So does anyone else have any other suggestions?
I agree with what you've said, Sarah. I think it's really important that if students are rebooking travel or the airlines are rebooking travel for when the travel ban is over on May 30th, just be a little cautious. We will proceed. We will make sure that we process your quarantine applications. We will make sure that we're working with residents, and maybe residents would like to our amazing Ashley might like to speak to how she would like to handle that in residence. But we want to make sure that you're set and you're prepared, but we also want you to be a little worried and thinking about what if it doesn't go through perfectly. It is very likely that travel ban could be extended. So please make sure you've checked with the airline that you have a rebookable flight. We want to make sure that you're not disadvantaged further. Ashley, do you have anything to say about the residence piece?
Yes, so I've had a few students already start emailing me. So when they get their flights automatically rebooked because they were already in that stage 2. So sending an email is the best way. So if you can just send me an email just to confirm that we can accommodate you here on your new arrival date, since we had to cancel all of the quarantines that were from the start of the travel ban to about May 22nd. So send me an email. My email is resops@lakeheadu.ca. So that's resops@lakeheadu.ca. We can throw that in the chat. And if you can also include your student number, that would be really great. For students that already had accommodations booked, I'm trying my best to just keep you in a similar type of accommodation space. Of course, it'll just depend on availability, but it doesn't hurt to at least get that process started, especially if your flight's already been rebooked.
Great, thanks, Ashley.
Sarah, would you be able to speak to students who are thinking about traveling through third countries? And I know Chris would like to also talk about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, while they have banned direct flights from India and Pakistan, there potentially are ways to do indirect flights through connecting countries and or cities to get to Canada. And while that's a possibility, we are not encouraging it. And one of the reasons is that many of these sort of connecting country cities are also now following suit and putting in flight restrictions. And so you're going to find where maybe 3 days ago it was open, maybe it's not now. And also, you know, you have to provide an updated PCR, so COVID test, at your very last entry point prior to Canada. So if you're connecting through an direct route through another country, you're going to need to make sure that you can actually get that test done, I'm assuming in that airport, and be able to provide that negative test, hoping that it's negative to continue on. You know, there might be an overnight to wait for it. We don't know what the variables will be in those situations. And so we're concerned for you, and we want to make sure that you're making informed decisions, because the last thing we want is for you to be stranded somewhere, you know, just due to the bans and the situation. And so also, you know, in the instance you were then to test positive, what happens then in that country? Where do you know what happens? Where do you go? Do you go to a government facility? So those are all things that you need to think about. So it's not just as simple as, well, I'm just going to reroute and go around. You know, there's a lot of variables to that. So we really want you to be aware of that and be concerned about it, and do your due diligence to ensure that you know all the processes involved in taking those indirect routes. Because it could be expensive, and you know, and we just want you to be aware of those things. Hopefully I've touched on everything. Also involved in that is your medical insurance when you're traveling through different countries. And so I'll pass it over to Chris so he can explain a little further what our university health insurance covers.
Thanks, Sarah. So university health insurance, or UHIP as you're going to hear it called, it starts the moment you land in Canada. So the way we do it is we're aware of your travel plans, your quarantine plans. We know what airport in Canada you're landing in. So students are enrolled upon their arrival date. If you're planning to travel to other countries to get into Canada indirectly, you need to be aware that UHIP doesn't cover any expenses on your journey to Canada. You might have coverage currently in your home country. Maybe you're covered under your parents for certain things. But if you are traveling, it's definitely worth considering if you don't have coverage to look into getting travel insurance. Something that'll cover like a COVID test or possible quarantine in these other countries that you're connecting through. In Canada, COVID testing at mass testing sites is free. You can walk in and just get it done. I don't believe other countries have the same procedure for doing this. So definitely look into travel insurance if you are traveling to more than one country, if you're not coming directly to Canada. Really consider any possible medical situations that could come up, where you're traveling or when you're traveling. So yeah, really just consider how you're getting into the country and listen to the advice that LUI is giving you. I'll give you the UHIP email. It's uhip@lakeheadu.ca. I'll put it up in the chat in case you guys have any questions about UHIP or health insurance or your UHIP card or quarantining or COVID testing or anything like that. I'll put the email up there. You guys can get in touch with me, okay?
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
I'll just jump in there, Sarah, if that's okay, on the topic of UHIP and health insurance and access to healthcare. Just a reminder that as part of preparing to travel, it's a good idea to top up on any prescriptions or medications that you have in your home country. So if you need to get those refilled, make sure that you have a good supply to bring with you to make sure you're covered during your quarantine period and beyond until you get settled that you can access local health services in Canada. Just a reminder about another thing you need to do in preparing for travel.
Thanks, Katie. Jen, I see you've marked one, and I'm going to answer one question that kind of maybe leads into this one first. A student has asked, is work essential? And so I'm going to answer it in regards to sort of the quarantine approval piece. And so if you are a student of Lakehead and you're coming to Canada through our Lakehead quarantine commitment plan, and I think this is more relevant sort of at this point where we are in the year right now, because we're going into the summer, and so students come and work full time during the summer, and this is sort of where we're having a bit of issues. And so you need to provide upcoming terms registration. So you're coming as a student, and you need to have reasons for coming, which means studying. So coming to work for a part-time job is not a valid, that's not something that we can approve. You'd have to be actively studying in the spring summer term. And so, but that scenario varies if you're coming, for different reasons, potentially. I don't know if Jen, you want to add anything to that I may have forgotten. And then Jen's also going to answer a question around what all documentation do I need for the immigration process?
Definitely. So entering Canada as a worker or a student are two totally different processes. And if you look at the IRCC link that I've provided, it's directed on students. Sorry, everybody, I'll be right back.
Thanks, Jen. No worries. I'm assuming it's probably our emergency phone going off. Unfortunately, that we don't stop for that. So Jen will continue her question after that. Okay, let's go to another question here. And just on my working point, one student, Veronica, I will get back to you specifically about that after this webinar, just so you know. Is quarantining in the same city as your campus a government requirement or a university policy? Great question. So all of the post-
Sorry, everyone, never a dull moment here.
Sorry, Jen, do you want to hop back in? I can wait for my question.
Sorry, yes, okay. So going back into that, entering Canada as a worker or student are totally different. So if you're coming as a student, you must adhere to our requirements and policy. However, if you graduated from Lakehead, you must apply and receive your postgraduate work permit. So you cannot have it in progress. It must already be approved for you to return to Canada. And then you must follow the procedures to enter as a worker. And that is a little bit different. Still have to do the quarantine requirements and so forth. But you can see that on the IRCC website. Students, I understand that students who have worked or studied already for 1 year, you are eligible to work full-time over the summer break in Canada. The rules to be able to work, you must be a full-time student in the semester before and preceding. So as long as you're registering as a full-time student in the fall, you will be able to enter and you would be able to work during the summer break. However, we will have to wait until the fall registration opens and you register for classes and then you can enter. Even new students can enter up to 60 days in advance. I know students are wondering, do I need to quarantine before classes start in September? As of now, we haven't announced, although I know the intention is to be in person. So of course, we recommend getting here and doing your quarantine in the month of August, just in case classes are in person, you are prepared for that. As for the second question there around the documents. So if your question is asking what documents you need to apply for a study permit, you need to have your letter of acceptance, proof of identity, and proof of finance. And that is also done through the IRCC website. However, I think your question is related to entry in Canada and what documents you need to show at the port of entry. So please note you must have study permit approval. So either your study permit or your approval letter, your visa stamping in your passport, or your electronic travel authorization for people who are visa exempt. You must have your approved quarantine and you must have proof of registration. So we always recommend downloading your current enrollment letter from MyInfo. We'll show that you're registered and you can show that to enter. For brand new students, you can also have your letter of acceptance. But for students who have already attended semesters previously, please just use your enrollment letter.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, so I'll skip back quickly to the other questions. So the question again was, is quarantining in the same city as your campus a government requirement or a university policy? So all of post-secondary institutions in Canada with the current pandemic had to submit a COVID-19 readiness plan for approval. If we were approved, which Lakehead was, we were added to the approved DLI list to accept international students into Canada under our quarantine commitment plan. So when we're talking about our Lakehead quarantine commitment plan website, that is basically what we developed based on our approved COVID-19 readiness plan. That plan is approved by the government. And so we are following government guidelines, protocols, procedures for our plan. And so saying that you have to quarantine in the city of your campus is a government requirement because it's a requirement of our local public health. So I hope that answers your question. I know it can be confusing. There's different layers to the Canadian government. We have the federal government, we talk about the provincial government, we talk about our public health. And so we understand that can be confusing. But please know we're following our government protocols when we're dealing with this, and we have to meet those requirements, which is why, when we're enforcing these rules, there's a reason for it. So okay, just gonna go through here.
Sarah, I can jump in about questions about Thunder Bay students wanting to quarantine in Aurelia. So that definitely is a possibility. We appreciate that if you plan to move closer with family after you complete quarantine and they're closer to the Aurelia campus, we're here to help you and make your transition as easy as possible. So if you are a Thunder Bay student and you're applying to quarantine in Aurelia, when you submit your stage 1 quarantine plan, check off Aurelia as your campus. That way it flags it for us. And then it comes to myself. I'm at the Aurelia campus, and then I can work with you one-on-one to make sure those arrangements are put in place.
Great, thanks, Katie. Okay, a question in the chat, and maybe I'll put this to our residence team just to talk a little bit about fee structures. But if they're going to stay on campus, do we need to pay separately for the quarantine stay at the university? And I'm assuming potentially the student is sort of staying in residence for the full term, but then also planning to use the residence as quarantine facilities.
Yeah, I can answer that question. So for students that want to live on campus once you're finished your quarantine, we can do both. But for the semester to actually live in residence, we do need you to complete the spring summer application. Or if you're planning to come in the fall, you'll need to complete that fall winter application, which is now available through MyInfo. We are trying to put students for quarantine in their residence room as much as possible. It's not always possible, especially if it's a roommate situation. So in the event we do have to place you in, say, a quarantine townhouse or an apartment, then we do have a separate fee of $600 for that for the 14 days. But then your residence fees wouldn't start until the end of your quarantine. So let me know if that helps to answer that question.
Thanks, Ashley. An important thing to note too, when you're choosing your appropriate quarantine accommodations is when you choose residence, yes, you're paying the $600 for the 14 days, but it's really important to know that if you were to test positive during quarantine, your stay is extended. And so residence does not charge any extra fees for that time, which is something that's really important to consider. If you were staying in, let's say, an Airbnb or a quarantine approved hotel, you'd have to pay for those additional days. That's an added expense. So it's fantastic that residence is doing that. And so that's something to consider when you're choosing your quarantine housing options. Okay, another question coming in. Maybe I'll put this to Chris. Can I know about your deferral and refund policy for fall 2021? So Chris, obviously, maybe you can talk to the refund policy.
Yeah, I mean, any payments that you've made can be moved to a future term. If you're deferring from, let's say, the spring, summer to the fall, or from the fall to the winter, any payment you make, we can move to that term. One important thing to say is that if you're registered, because a lot of you will be registered because it's a requirement, and you're deferring, you need to withdraw from your classes or withdraw through graduate studies if you're a graduate student. Any fees on your account after the final day to register, I believe our refund policy says you're charged a percentage of those. So I think September 20th is the last day to register right now for fall 2021. So if you're fully withdrawn before that date, all of your fees should be easily deferred. As far as refunded, if you're requesting a refund, same deal. You have to be fully withdrawn. You can't have any fees owing on your account. And we refund students just by reversing the payment back to the account it came from. So.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And maybe one of our advisors, if you want to speak to, I'm assuming they're asking about the option to defer from the semester they've been, and they're planning to enter into.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So if you want to defer, most of the time it's not a problem. There are certain programs that may not allow you to defer to the following term. So please reach out to us. I'll put our advising email addresses in the chat box because the process is different for undergrad students and grad students. And as I said, it is program dependent as well. So please reach out to us and we can assist you on an individual basis.
Thanks, Laura. Okay, I see everyone's been a busy bee answering questions. So we just had another one pop up. I'm traveling to Canada on May 5th. Do I need to apply for UHIP before landing in Canada? And so part of this process is, Chris, once you are approved for our quarantine plan and we know your actual arrival date, Chris is aware of that. And so you're automatically enrolled in the UHIP plan. You don't actually have to do anything on your end. Chris will ensure that you're enrolled for the date that you arrive in Canada. And then you'll be sent an email with your electronic insurance policy card. And most places will accept the electronic copy, I believe. But then at the point where you can access a printer, you may want to print it and keep a copy in your wallet as well. So you don't actually have to do anything on your end. But if you're ever worried about it, of course, you can email Chris and touch base with him at the UHIP email.
Yep, it's in the chat there.
So another question came in. So I only need to get a COVID negative test report twice if I am changing the country before arriving to Canada. So I think you're referring to, so you need a negative COVID test within 72 hours of boarding in your home country. And like Katie said, some countries it's 96, so it's up to you to determine what your home country's policy is. But if you're connecting through indirect routes right now, I believe then you also need to have a test and provide a negative test at the last entry prior to Canada. Do I have that right, Sabrina?
Yeah, you are correct, Sarah. If you're flying through an indirect country, you have to make sure that you've arranged a COVID test, the right COVID test in that other country. So for example, if you're flying through Dubai, you're required to have a COVID test before you leave India to go to Dubai, although there's a 10-day travel restriction for students to travel to Dubai right now. But if you were traveling to, say, France for now, you would have to have a COVID test in France. We do not know, we're not familiar if you can get a COVID test in the airport. You need to really check this out. You might be delayed a few days in France while you have a COVID test and get the results back. There could be costs involved. And you need to consider if the test came back positive, you would not be allowed to board your flight to Canada from France. So you would be stuck in France in quarantine, and that could pose a significant cost to you, the inconvenience. So we just want to make sure that you do all of your research before you travel.
Thanks, Sabrina. Also, keep in mind our resident staff is here, everyone. So if you have questions about residents, specific questions, what options there are or what's included, please feel free to pose those questions as we go through. It's fantastic that we have this resource available to you right now. Okay, if I register for residents, do I need to pay the $600 for quarantine stay for 14 days? As Ashley said, that yes, the $600 is for the 14 days. That's a separate charge from any other fees. And you can pay that upon arrival. Do I have that correct, Ashley?
Correct. Yep. So the $600 charge would just be for your accommodations. It doesn't include your food or meals. And it would be applied right to your student account shortly after you check in here. So that's kind of another benefit to booking through here is you don't have to prepay anything. So in case you have a cancellation or plans change, we can just update that on our end as long as you keep us posted. If you're going to be living in residence, reach out to me by email, because what I'd like to do is I can just take a look and see wherever possible, we would just like resident students to quarantine in their residence rooms. That way you don't have to relocate again once your quarantine is done. So I'll work with you to make that happen as much as we can, and then we can talk about rates for that as well.
Great, thanks, Ashley. So question from an undergraduate student around timelines. So right now is the end of the winter semester. So you're finishing your semester, and for undergrads, normally this is a summer break for you, and then you resume your classes in the fall term. So there's a few different scenarios here. And so for most of our undergrads, particularly new students that are starting in the fall 2021 semester, you need to wait until the fall 2021 registration opens. So that's usually the end of June, beginning of July. There's about a week span where different year levels can register at progressing dates. And so you'll have to wait and register full time for your fall winter semester. And then when you're registered full time, because remember we said that's upcoming terms registration is a requirement, then you can apply for your stage 1 approval and plan your arrival in July or August. And I know that's disappointing news for some that were really eager and wanting to come to Canada and arrive, in May or June. But unfortunately, it's just something, the protocols that we have to follow right now. And so you need to wait, register full-time for the fall semester, plan your arrival in July or August. And please reach out and submit your stage 1 so that we can process it, approve it, then you can book your flights and then plan to hopefully arrive before the start of classes and be on track. Okay. For an undergrad students, UHIP cost is included. So, okay, so UHIP is a separate charge. It's separate from your tuition, and it will show up on your account as a separate charge. The billing period for UHIP again is from September 1st to August 31st of each year. So if you're coming at a time in between that, you're only charged on a monthly rate. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're arriving on June 1st. You'll be charged for June, July, and August, the monthly rate. Then when our start of the UHIP billing season starts again, Chris, obviously if you're actively registered full-time, Chris will then re-enroll you, and then your billing will start for that academic year. Do I have that correct, Chris?
Yeah, that's correct. So the billing, our policy runs from September to the end of August. So whatever month you show up in, you're billed the monthly fee till August, and then you're re-enrolled at the full year rate. So
great, thanks, Chris. Another common question we get is when you do your federal government quarantine in your port of entry city for 3 days, Do you then shift to Thunder Bay and now your quarantine is only 11 days? No, it is a full 14 days. Again, that is our local public health region's requirements. So your 3-day hotel stay in your port of entry city is not deducted from your quarantine. You still do a full 14 days in Thunder Bay.
Hey, Sarah, I'm just going to jump in real quick about the medicals, because this is something new and something that we're coming across as well. Immigration medical you've done with panel physician in your home country when you applied for your visa. Those medicals are valid for 1 year. Students whose medicals are past 1 year have been receiving notices in their IRCC portal stating that another immigration medical must be done before they can travel to Canada. The medical has to be done within 12 months. So if you plan to come to Canada by August 2021 and your medical was completed in August 2020, you are fine. But after that 1 year, you will need to show a new medical when you enter. If you see your medical is going to be close to 1 year of expiry and you plan to travel after that date, we definitely recommend looking into that panel physician medical, getting it done as soon as possible, and holding that record for when you're ready to travel. As long as you're going to be traveling to Canada within the year, you know it's okay to start the process now. We know that many countries went back into lockdown. It can be very difficult to access these doctors. So please give yourself enough time. And yes, that could be a barrier if you try to enter and your medical is a year or more older.
Great, thanks, Jen. I understand that, for some, it may seem excessive for having 3 days of a hotel stay, then an additional 14 days in quarantine. But please know that there's reasons that public health does these things, and it's for the safety of not only yourself, but for our communities. There have already been instances where students test negative in Toronto in their port of entry test, and then test positive 7 days later in their Thunder Bay quarantine. So the incubation period of COVID is different for everybody. Some show up quite quickly, some take longer to incubate. And so there's a reason why the tests are spread out. There's a reason why we have these timeframes in place for quarantine, and it's to catch this so you're not then heading out to the community thinking that you're negative, but you're not, and then spreading this to our vulnerable populations. So it's really important for community safety. And we know it's not easy. Quarantining for 14 days is not easy. We're not going to sugarcoat it. It's difficult and it's challenging, but we know how incredibly resilient you all are. You've come so far up until now, and give yourselves a big pat on the back for doing this and keeping our community safe, and knowing how big of a part you're playing, and the inner strength that you're finding to get through this. It's not easy, but please know that we are here for you, whether it's the process leading up to getting here, while you're in quarantine, after quarantine. Our whole team really cares about you, and we're here for you every step of the way. So, that's why we're doing these webinars, to make sure that we're sort of arming you with as much resources and information as we can, so that you can make those informed decisions. Okay. A question about maybe, oh, I see you're typing, Chris, but it's a question about LUSU fees and other fees on the account.
Yeah, sure. I was just typing. So basically the fees that you see are all the fees that have been approved. You're not able to opt out of any of the fees. I know there was a brief moment in time where students had the option to opt out. That was overturned by Ontario courts. So it's whatever you see in your fees is it's compulsory. There's no way to opt out of them. The only thing that you could possibly opt out of if you're studying outside of the country are the UHIP fee, because your UHIP is only valid in Canada, as well as LUSU medical, and the LUSU bus pass. Those are billed in September though, so if we'll know at the time if you're not going to be in Canada, and then we'll not bill you for those fees. So there's no need for students to opt out. If you're not eligible, we won't bill you for it. And if you have any other questions about that, you can send an email to accounts@lakeheadu.ca. That's also me. So,
Chris, would you be able to talk a little bit about extended health coverage for students?
yeah, so in September, extended health coverage is for students that are studying in Canada, and it's run by LUSU, your student union. To make it easy to understand, UHIP it's what's called primary insurance. So it's accidents, emergencies, you're sick. The LUSU plan is what's called secondary insurance. It includes things like prescription, dental cleanings, eyeglasses, things that aren't necessarily an emergency. So all full-time undergrad students in Canada are automatically billed the LUSU secondary plan, the LUSU health plan. They're also billed the bus pass and UHIP, of course. So, but students that aren't in Canada, they shouldn't be assessed these fees. But if you are in Canada and you have the LUSU plan, it includes, again, like things like physiotherapy, things that aren't covered under UHIP. I would highly recommend getting to know both of these plans. Websites are pretty simple. It's uhip.ca, and then lusu.ca will get you to the health plan. Graduate students are not automatically enrolled in the LUSU's plan. It's optional. I would strongly suggest that if you don't have a GA which includes secondary coverage, that you consider opting into the LUSU plan.
Great, thanks, Chris.
And again, if you have questions about that, you could email uhip.ca or uhip@lakeheadu.ca.
Thanks, Chris. So I'm just being sensitive to time. So we're a little after 10 now. And so you know what, we could probably go on for quite a while answering questions. But I know everyone has other commitments after this. And so we'll end the webinar for now. We have recorded it, so we'll have access to that on our website. And so I just want to thank everyone today for attending, our students, our guests for attending. A big thank you to our LUI team, Chris Gallinger, and our Residence Life team for joining us today. My co-host, Katie. Please know we're here for you. Use those resources that we gave you. Questions about arrival and quarantine, email the quarantine.intl website. Reach out to our advisors. We have our online virtual booking system. You can get a one-on-one appointment with any of our advisors. So that's on our online community of care website, which is within the Lakehead website. Residence questions or bookings, please email Ashley at resops@lakeheadu.ca. Again, Chris at accounts or UHIP. Please reach out to us. We're here to answer your questions, and any that we didn't get to, we will get to. So please reach out. So before I sign off, does anyone have anything else to add last minute before we go?
I'm just wondering, as a team, if we can, Faith has 3 different questions in her question. Maybe we could break it up and quickly answer it.
Absolutely, yeah. If anyone has a commitment and needs to leave, please feel free. And in the meantime, we can answer Faith. So I'll read her question. If due to COVID protocol changes, you're unable to enter the school year during the fall term, but you've paid for your confirmation deposit and housing deposit for fall, can it be transferred to enter the winter term? So that'll be question 1. If you enter during the winter term, would you still be considered as a full-time student? As well as you applied for your visa during this time, will it be available for winter term? So in regards to fees, like Chris said, they can be transferred if you defer. And so those fees can be transferred over. When you start in the winter term, maybe I'll put this to the advisors, but it's a little bit different for what you're considered as full-time.
And I will just ask, maybe Ashley can talk about the housing deposit if the student needs to reapply for residence for winter.
I'm sorry, I actually don't know the answer to that one, but I can get an answer from residence accounts unless maybe Michelle or Jess or Shannon can speak to that.
Yeah, I can answer that. Yes, we would hold the spot for you and we would apply your charges, your deposit to your winter term. You just need to communicate that through our res admission folks, just to let us know what your plans are. And that can be as easily, because Ashley has been the person you've been in contact with regarding residents. I'll leave it with you contacting Ashley and she could forward it to the appropriate people.
Great, thank you.
And just to touch base about the visa part of that. So if your study permit is approved and you've deferred to a future intake, no stress at all. Just make sure that obviously when you start your studies, that visa is valid. The only thing you'll have to be mindful of is that your end date will now be later than your study permit. So you likely will have to do a study permit extension with me in the years to come.
Thanks, Jen. And if one of our advisors could maybe speak to the full-time status of starting in the winter term.
Sure. So depending on your level of study, whether you're an undergrad student or a graduate student, it varies. So graduate students are always classified as full-time. That's always how they will show up on their enrollment verification. For undergraduate students, it's a little bit tricky because status, whether you're part-time or full-time, is defined per academic year. So when you start in the winter term, on your enrollment verification, I believe it says you're part-time, but that's because you're starting in the winter term. So Jennifer, from what I understand, like IRCC would still classify students that begin in the winter term as full-time students because they acknowledge that they're starting in the winter and therefore are registered in the single semester that they're coming for.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Great, thanks. So hopefully that answers the three-part question for Faith. Well, that's nice from Chineze. We're glad that you're happy with everything, Chineze. It's nice to see those comments because we do work, our team works really hard to support our students. So thank you. We really appreciate your comments. One more quick question. How much is the 14 days quarantine fee on campus? It's $600 for the 14 days and that does not include meals.
I would just, maybe someone from residence could quickly respond to that. First, if full of quarantine students, and some students might have to quarantine in non-townhouses, there will be a mandatory meal charge. And so you need to plan for that. And maybe someone from residence could tell us what that would be.
Yes, so in the event that you're placed in a dorm room, just because you're not going to have access to a full kitchen, you're only really going to have a mini fridge in your room. And then some of the rooms will also just have a microwave where you can reheat your food. So those rooms would be a mandatory meal plan. So for the room, including your meals for the 14 days, it would be a total of $775, just depend on availability. And then in the event you needed to stay longer, let's say that you had a COVID test that was positive, we wouldn't charge you to stay in the room, but we would have to just charge you for the additional meals since it's through Aramark here on campus. And then we also have an optional meal delivery for students in the townhouses and apartments. So as of today, it's gonna be $30 per day. But if you're in the townhouse or apartment, it would be optional because you will have a kitchen where you can cook as well.
Thanks, Ashley. And yes, there are vegetarian meal options available. And Aramark has also recently added halal options to the menu as well. So you just need to indicate that so that residents and Aramark can prepare ahead of time and make sure that they have the appropriate meals to meet your dietary needs. How do I know if I've registered in health insurance? You're automatically enrolled from the date that you arrive in Canada, and you will receive an email from Chris with your electronic UHIP card, or sorry, probably not from Chris, from our insurance provider.
It'll come from Sun Life, and sometimes because it's an insurance company, it'll go to your spam or your trash folder. So just keep an eye out for it. You should get it within 24 hours of arriving in Canada.
Thanks, Chris. So I think we've answered all the questions for now. So I think we'll sign off then. And like I said, please reach out if you have any other questions. We are here for you. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Sarah.